Hey guys, Spudknocker here, as always. And I know I probably got some of you guys with kind of a clickbaity thumbnail, but I did want to dig in and talk about some topics that came up with a discussion with my mods on the Spuds Discord server in relation to the upcoming RAZBAM F-15E Strike Eagle, and kind of comparing it and contrasting it to the other multi-crew fighter jet within DCS world, the F-14B Tomcat, and why I think people are going to really enjoy flying the F-15E in DCS world, specifically in multiplayer, and why I think for a lot of people it's going to rival flying the F-14B Tomcat. So this will be kind of another one of those free-flowing discussion videos, kind of like our Why Pilots Can't Turn Right video that we did a couple weeks ago. That was a very popular video, it seemed to be, and I think you guys would also be interested in this little discussion that we had between myself and my mods over on the Spuds Discord server. So we'll go ahead and continue with our little practice runs, dropping some LGBs on some targets here on the Syria map, that airbase just outside of Damascus. And we'll go ahead and get our F-14 set up and ready for combat. We'll fence in, we'll get our displays ready to go. We'll swap it over to our targeting pod display. Do note that I am in fact using the lantern targeting pod mod to allow the pilot to use the lantern pod from the front seat, something that I think is an absolutely essential mod and is one of the central issues that's at stake here with this discussion that we're going to be talking about here. So we'll go ahead and go to the air to ground mode on our HUD. And of course, we'll tell Jester to select our air-to-ground ordnance, and we'll go ahead and throw it into air-to-ground mode, and then we'll go ahead and queue up waypoint 1, and we'll go ahead and zoom in on this airfield that's out here out in front of us. And so we'll go ahead and start this kind of discussion topic that we've been talking about. So most of my mods that actually help run the Discord server that I run called Spuds, they actually are members of a rather serious but still fun milsim group called CSG8 that fly nothing but carrier-based aircraft, which of course the F-14B is one of the most famous ones within DCS world, along with the F-A-18C. And one of the big issues they have with actually recruiting members and getting F-14s to fly in their missions, and it's something that I've noticed as well, is the fact that the RIO seat requires a completely separate and different skill set from the front seat. I know that you guys, of course, know this in spades and are very familiar with this if you've flown the F-14 at all within DCS, but this topic definitely influences how I look at the F-15E Strike Eagle coming from RAZBAM and how I look back at the F-14B. Now keep in mind that this discussion is not about using the aircraft in real life, in real combat situations, or flying the aircraft in real life. This discussion is all about DCS World Pilots, how it affects DCS World Pilots, and how it will influence DCS World Pilots' purchasing decisions. So we'll go ahead and get a little bit closer to our target here, and we'll go ahead and get our pod into a position where we can actually track some targets. Go ahead and throw them into area mode. We got our wings into bomb mode. Start scanning for some targets here. Looks like maybe we've got some sort of aircraft or something on the ramp here. Maybe a helicopter, actually. Definitely kind of looks more like a helicopter. Oh, we definitely got some aircraft here. Looks like a couple of Su-24s, maybe. So we'll go ahead and put one of these 2,000 pounders right between these Su-24s. So we'll go ahead and designate that, and we'll throw the aircraft into Q designate mode. And we'll go ahead and go around for another pass on the target. So back to the discussion at hand is, of course, the F-15E versus the F-14B in practice in DCS world. Now, I recently did a survey of people in my Spuds Discord server through Google surveys that was all about what aircraft do you own, what aircraft do you enjoy flying the most, what maps do you like flying the most on, and interestingly to me, it kind of validated what I kind of sort of thought about DCS World Pilots, but the vast majority, about 52% of all DCS World Pilots enjoy flying the F-18C Hornet the most. And I think that this will translate over to the F-15E incredibly well. And I've done some one-on-one trainings with transitioning people from the F-A-18C over to the AV-8B, and they can transition very, very easily because the avionics are very, very similar. This is also true of the F-15E Strike Eagle. The avionics are incredibly similar to that of what's in the current F-18C in DCS World. They're both McDonnell Douglas, originally McDonnell Douglas, now Boeing products. They have the exact same stick, they have almost the exact same throttle, and a lot of the flight instruments, such as the backup instruments, the IFE, all these kinds of things are duplicated between the two jets, as well as in the front seat you have the 3 screens, a center lower screen and 2 upper left and right screens. I believe they're just called MFDs in the F-15E, but don't hold me to that. But anyway, we're coming back around on our target here. And in the backseat of the F-15E, it's really more or less a duplication of what's in the front seat, with some added screens for the additional situational awareness of the guy in the backseat, whose main job is of course not to fly the jet, but of course just to look for targets with the targeting pod and find targets and then help the pilot engage those targets. He can also of course run the radar and all that, but what's interesting about the F-15E to me is the fact that the Pilot and the RIO, or sorry, the WSO, can do all the same functions as the guy in front or in back, and as a result, there, in DCS World anyway, there's going to be no specialized training that's required for somebody to hop into the back seat of an F-15E. And that's going to be something that I think is going to be a massive, massive boon to DCS World multiplayer. So let's go ahead and get this bomb on target. And we'll get that laser latched. I like to, of course, drop my LGBs in the F-14 with the lantern pod in Q designate mode, because the targeting pod is much less likely to actually walk away from or lose its lock on the point when in Q designate mode. And hopefully we'll get a nice shack here. Putting a 2,000-pound bomb between 2 fighter jets like this, even though it's not a direct hit, is absolutely going to ensure that these aircraft never fly again. And it looks like the bomb actually missed our laser spot and hit right on top of the second Su-24 here, but definitely ripped the wings off of the guy on the right-hand side there. So that's a pretty cool shot there. So we'll go ahead and turn off our laser and we'll continue on. And we'll check it right 90 degrees, so that way we can start queuing up another target pretty quickly and easily here. And you can see with the wings swept in bomb mode, we're definitely having a harder time bringing the jet around. She's definitely getting to that higher angle of attack. Closer and closer to that critical angle of attack, faster and faster because of the wings being swept back so far. So now that we're checked 90 degrees, we'll go ahead and throw her back into altitude hold mode. We'll go into area track mode, and we'll put our next bomb. Let's go ahead and find another target here. Let's see what we can find. Yeah, it looks like an anti-aircraft truck. That's a lame target. Let's look at a helicopter there. Let's go for the helicopter. Okay, we'll designate that point and call it Q designate mode. And so I think that's going to be something that's going to be a massive, massive boon to people actually wanting to fly in the back seat, is the fact that there's no specialized training for the F-15E in a DCS setting. Of course, I know WSOs in the real USAF, the Royal Saudi Air Force, the Republic of Korea Air Force, every other Air Force that flies F-15E Strike Eagle variants, of course those WSOs go through very, very specialized training to do their jobs to the best of their ability in that back seat and help out their pilot, of course. But in DCS world, because things are more or less the same in terms of how things actually work avionics-wise between the front seat and the back seat of the F-15E, people, including myself, are going to want to fly in the back seat a lot more. Virtual squadrons and virtual air wings are going to find themselves able to fill up the rosters of F-15E's flights a lot easier than they are of F-14B flights. I know that in my missions and in CSG-8 missions before, they've had issues with actually getting enough RIOs to actually fly with the number of pilots they have. And so some pilots are flying with Jester, which isn't necessarily the best thing in the world, and some pilots are just kind of winging it using mods like the Lantern Control mod, like we're using now, things like that that aren't ideal situations. But, like I said, with that F-15E, we'll go ahead and drop, and we'll get the laser latched. With the F-15E, that's not necessarily going to be a problem because those pilots and those WSOs are going to be very interchangeable, swapping back and forth depending upon what is needed by their virtual squadron, what they want to fly that day, and so on. And so it looks like maybe an Mi-8 that we're dropping on. It's a 2,000-pound bomb on an Mi-8. That thing is going to be absolutely obliterated. And kaboom. One less Mi-8 in the world. So that was pretty fun. But anyway, back to our topic. I think it's just going to be make DCS World multiplayer missions in more casual as well as milsim situations a lot easier for mission planners to make and put together, just because people are going to want to actually be in that back seat. Desert Saker, who is Mr. Rio extraordinaire, one of the mods of the Spuds Discord server, he has a really hard time with actually getting people to jump into that backseat and take the time to learn all the intricacies of the backseat, because it's a niche thing within DCS World, which is already a very niche thing in the greater gaming industry, I guess you could say. It's very cool to press the big red button and see your phoenixes fly off while your pilot is flying around trying to dodge missiles coming at you, or look for targets and point out targets in a dogfight from the back seat. But the intricacies of how to get the radar slewed to targets, how to make sure your phoenixes go after bad guys instead of good guys, all these kinds of things that are very intricate and very time consuming in the back seat of the F-14 don't interest people quite as much. And with the fact that the F-15E will also have controls duplicated in the back seat and allow the backseater to actually fly the plane, albeit to a much more limited capability because of forward visibility and all that kind of stuff, it's going to make for more fun teamwork for a lot of players in DCS World, I think, because, your pilot is getting too close to the tanker and you're about to collide. That backseater can yank that stick forward and, of course, get you guys out of harm's way very quickly, just as been done in real life by real-life F-15E Wizzos who have had to save their jet because maybe the pilot got a little bit careless or made a little mistake, or some turbulence or something like that uplifted them up into almost crashing into a tanker or wingman or something like that. Having those duplicated controls in the backseat are going to be a lot of fun. And I'm sure we'll see crazy videos and things like that of, say, your pilot gets killed by AAA in the front seat and the WSO flies it all the way back and lands it. I mean, if you can land a P-51 in DCS World with no forward visibility for the runway, then you can definitely land an F-15E from the back seat. Things like that are going to be a lot more fun, I think, for people, and a lot more accessible for people to hop into the back seat of the F-15E than the F-14. And of course, that's not a knock on Heapler or anything like that. They do incredible work with making the F-14 an absolutely awesomely realistic and beautiful jet in DCS World. It's just something that's going to make things more accessible for other DCS World pilots, including myself. I spend a ton of time in DCS World, obviously, and I spend a lot of money on DCS World modules to try and keep you guys up to date, and I just don't have the time to learn the back seat as well as the front seat in the F-14 and want to make things work that way. So I hope this kind of little discussion here was interesting to you guys. It's interesting to me to see what people think about it, and it was interesting to talk to Saker, who is, you know, Mr. Rio nerdy extraordinaire who loves flying in the backseat of the F-14, talk about his experiences of trying to get people to fly in the backseat.
All right, we've got mud right in front of us.
And why it's difficult.
And mud, 6 o'clock.
And the F-15E will pose its own challenges, very similarly to that gun run that we just saw here in the F-14, is that the F-14 is a pure fighter, with that gun tilted up quite a few degrees, making it a bit of a challenge to actually strafe ground targets. The F-15E still has its gun canted up a few degrees for better use in a dogfight against bad guys, bandits that they're being chased in a dogfight. So things like that are still going to be challenges in the F-15E, similar to the F-14. And of course, it's going to have all those, you know, whiz-bang electronics that people really, really like in the F-18C. And it's going to be really cool. And of course, for those of you guys who own the Thrustmaster F-18 stick, that's going to work very, very, very well in the F-15E as well, because it uses the exact same stick. I think the buttons are slightly differently placed on the stick, but it's the same molding, the same everything that is there for you on the F-18 stick. So we'll go ahead and do another gun run here. So it's very, very important in a jet with a gun that is canted up so highly to actually make sure that you are in a nice steep dive angle.
Mud on our nose, 12 o'clock.
And those rounds fell short. Oh well. And we'll make sure we pump out a lot of chaff. Flares, that is. But anyway, just my 2 cents on the upcoming Strike Eagle, and it's also why I don't really mind the fact that there's not an AI in the back seat. The fact that you can run the entire jet from the front seat, with only just a couple circuit breakers being in the back seat that a WSO would have to handle that aren't in the front seat, is okay with me. I mean, Jester is great, and Jester is fantastic for a jet where you truly cannot do everything from the front seat in the F-14, such as selecting my air-to-ground weapons like we did earlier. Things like that make it a lot more difficult, of course, to fly and get the most out of your F-14 being by yourself. And then, of course, the accessibility of being able to hop back and forth between the seats very, very easily is going to be awesome. And of course, there's going to be people like Desert Saker who absolutely love being in the backseat of the F-15E and will specialize in being absolute wizards with targeting pods and things like that. But for the vast majority of DCS World pilots, including myself, as well as lots of the guys that are on the Spuds Buds Discord server, it's just going to be really awesome to be able to hop back and forth and be able to fill up the rosters of F-15Es in missions much, much better. In my missions, at most, we can usually get about 4 F-14s fully crewed for strike missions. Usually that's down to about 2 F-14s with actual crews, with having good RIOs in the back seats, and then the other 2 F-14s are usually buddy lasing or dropping their LGBs in CCIP mode, because the RIO in the back seat either doesn't know how yet, or hasn't dug into the intricacies of using the lantern pod, or there is no RIO at all. And so a lot of people also haven't dug into using this lantern control mod for the front seat here, and so that is also a hindrance to actually being able to use the F-14B in the strike role when flying the jet by yourself. So I hope this was kind of interesting for you guys. You know, it was something that has been on my mind for a little bit, and I definitely wanted to make a video about, and I'm just incredibly hyped for the F-15E coming out. It was very, very cool a few weeks ago how we saw some screenshots of the F-15E that was released from RAZBAM, showing it shooting down a MiG or something like that in DCS World itself. And of course, this discussion has no bearing on the actual use of the real jet at all, but only on DCS World gameplay and DCS World pilots and how they're going to use it. So, I hope you guys liked it. And if you did, definitely give it a like and a subscribe, and fly safe out there, guys.